So how do we want to proceed with this? We've got it on an hour. And we've got the document here, which we can review. We need to pick a facilitator and a note taker as well. So how do you guys want to approach that?
So the task, the product is to come back with a working definition. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
Making sense to take notes.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, Jason. And then
Don't thank me yet. Someone said I can attempt to take notes.
I appreciate your part. I appreciate your part.
Statement.
And then who would like to facilitate us? I love her work on validity. Pamela Moss.
This is really old, like 30 years old. But it's shifting conceptions of validity and educational measurement implications for performance assessment.
So,
Okay, but if I'm facilitating that means I need to not be doing that and actually writing on the conversation. So I'm not sure if we want to just take some time to look through the documents first.
or do we want anyone who has any suggested resources like you just shared to offer those up? And then we can review those as well as this one. I don't have any resources to bring to the table.
Or you were adding a resource.
It's a possibility, yeah, I can,
Please use my government approved
I was gonna
CTC.
say, okay, I better,
I'm afraid
Barriers
out of it because I know I won't be able to get back in.
It kicked me out of my other emails.
Oh, yeah, it does.
you know what, I just
Yeah.
actually,
I don't get notified when email comes on that account, so it's like,
To check it.
yeah, I do.
super annoying.
I opened a separate browser just for that one.
Yeah.
Okay, very uneventful, which was nice.
So
Where'd you get from?
It's a city, little small city, Hercules.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
About how far?
it's an hour.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's awesome.
No, it's in the East Bay.
not two T's or one T.
One, just like Romeo.
And where are you coming from?
From Riverside.
Oh, that's
So,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
So we went early this morning.
Oh, no. What time did you get here?
Got here about 9 o'clock.
Oh, wow. So you've been here. Okay. Do we have a list of everybody's email addresses? That's where.
I don't know. I clicked on new. And it says two.
Yeah. When I say two.
Mine was
Nothing.
my-
Can you click on the two?
Was my name, first name dot last name CTC
That's right.
Yeah.
dot CA dot.
EASLEY.
What now?
I'm trying to spell your last name.
Morgan.
Yeah, not at all.
And mine is super long.
CTC. Is it
CA.gov.
Dot CA dot gov.
.gov. Okay, there's one.
And mine is Ursula.
Yeah, I'm saving you for last.
Okay. I'll write it down for you.
Shayna, it's SHAYNA dot Sullivan, right? Ursula dot, okay.
Estrada.
Estrada, is it all one dash Reveles? It's Uncle Warren.
Anyway.
Yeah.
You have a timekeeper?
I can keep time. I can keep time.
Send it to you.
Thank you.
Look through for you guys yet?
Not yet.
What was the name of the article?
Shifting conceptions of validity in educational measurements, implications for performance. assessment. Yeah, you could probably just, I just Googled.
Four
Moss,
words.
yeah. And Pamela Moss.
Got it, Juliet.
Okay.
Just texted me that she's supposed to be in this meeting room, breakout room, but she's still in the commission room.
Oh, I'll go bug Adam about it.
Okay.
You said Tina?
This one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tina, Tech is messaging her that she has to affirmatively consent to being a panelist so that she can then be sent over here.
Okay.
I think those were all the words I was supposed to tell you. Yes.
I can't get that article for some reason, and the email didn't come through.
Formally,
I got the
attest to what?
Maybe I spelled
To
it.
being a panelist.
Yeah, it came back.
I should be doing it.
Oh,
Oh, I see you texting right now on the screen. Or it was just a caption.
That's just what we're saying.
Oh, you know what? I missed the last E. So, no, that's my fault completely. Yep. Okay, there might be one message that's just all the language thing that bounced back to me. I think I forwarded the wrong one, and then there should be a final message that actually has it.
It's popped me out of that email and I can't get back into it. How do you guys get into it?
I have a separate browser open on my computer.
I have to go to
Like-
incognito, so.
Yeah,
open
there
the
you go.
browser And then you gotta make it private,
Yeah.
and then you go to Microsoft Outlook. And then open that, and then put your CTC email in.
I just see it. I
Did you
use-
use the authenticator?
I did originally when I set it all up.
You have to do that every time.
But if you already have the authenticator on your phone, it'll send it a code. Yeah. Yeah, mine did. Like something, so. On here. It's fine.
It's probably not worth all the right now. I think that'd be helpful if you want to give like a short, are there parts that you think would be particularly helpful for us to consider? Honestly, I know I just, when I think about validity,
This is
I
what
think
you
about
do.
her work.
Grab that,
I don't-
go in and chat GPT.
There you go.
And
Tina-
ask
Tina
chat
is trying to-
GPT. what
To
is
summarize it?
To summarize what it says about validity. So you have a chat GPT?
I struggle with the Wi-Fi, so I ended up using my friend's hotspot.
That's what I'm using.
Anyone
My
else?
hotspot. I'm using my hotspot.
Mhm.
You can use mine if you want.
Mine too.
It's got a really complicated name, Juliet's hotspot, I think.
Come up on mine.
It didn't?
Trying to just throw it in there where you.
I'm just reading the last, I don't know if it's really that.
You know if your Wi-Fi is working?
The public Wi-Fi is not working,
Okay.
so we've had to use hotspots just to get the laptops.
Are we able to log into the hotspot or?
We don't want to drain it too much, but
Or
let's see what the. Over here.
Dealing with like,
Yeah.
things dropping, whatever, my brain starts going, but.
if it
Yeah.
didn't have the links, that wouldn't be. That's first.
Hi Tina, welcome.
She may not be able to respond back. Right now, she's participating as a panelist. Until she gets to her physical location. She's en route.
Yeah, that's what she texted me, but I thought she was in now. She said she was in.
Well, she's in a room, but she's not in as a panelist yet. I asked her to tell me when she got to. Let me check my phone and see if she emailed me.
I mean, I think it does raise some good questions about the power structure that pertain to. I see that.
Well, in the last sentence, or in the last paragraph, she says we need to expand our conception of validity to include questions about why particular methods of inquiry are privileged and what the effects of that privileging are on the community.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. The choice of one or more methods of inquiry must not be taken for granted. And so in this article, she goes through and she's citing other researchers about the different modes of inquiry and the implications of it.
And conducting a critical analysis
Yeah.
of construct validity
Yep,
itself.
yep. Yeah. Arnold's metrics for job-based teacher assessment.
It says, as I suggested in the introduction, the emerging consensus on validity inquiry elaborated in the various categories described above. We located within a social science epistemology and emphasizes theory-based hypothesis testing, attention to behavioral consistencies and control of factors irrelevant to the intended inferences. And then there's a quote under there.
She cites Hartle 1991 assessment evaluation. Criterion related validity. To be useful, new teacher assessments must be relevant to the decisions they are to inform.
So now you're writing, is it the FAST?
Yeah, we have the FAST. Yeah.
Okay, and so what was your process to ensure that that was a valid and authentic assessment?
So I wasn't involved in the original development.
I can say that I was involved in, we just revised it to align with, the revisions to the performance assessment design standards around TPA 7.
Okay.
And so it always comes back to really thinking about what's expected of a new teacher, what's involved in teaching. When we think about a thoughtful, reflective practitioner. So what are the ideals
Right.
of a thoughtful, reflective practitioner who's gonna, gather information about their students, do some pre-assessments,
Right.
plan instruction that responds to that also aligns with the standards, deliver that instruction, or deliver sounds wrong to me, but
Provide.
implement that instruction, right? Where you're doing checks for understanding along the way, you're gathering data throughout. You might deviate from your original plans based on what happens with your students. You're gonna be collecting assessment data to evaluate it. You're gonna be thoughtfully reflecting on that assessment data, drawing some conclusions. And then you're gonna reflect overall on the experience and your strengths as a teacher. So that's really the process that we try to take candidates through with the FAST.
And so my understanding of content validity is that yes, and what you just said, yes, and measuring the degree of variability of those results is a big part of validating your content. That's my understanding, but I don't know if that's
Understanding of content validity.
And so I was looking online and doing a little bit of research on my own, and that was what I came away with, is that when you're, now there's different kinds of validity as well.
There definitely are.
There's construct validity, content validity,
I
so,
wonder if we want to do just a little quick
yeah, that would be
definition
helpful.
of different types of
Yep.
validity.
I think that we would find that helpful.
Well, I think when you're talking about an assessment that's meant to determine whether or not someone is capable, has the skills and abilities to carry out a professional task, we have to talk about predictive validity.
Yes, absolutely. So we know there's predictive validity, content validity, concurrent validity,
Construct validity.
construct
There's a
validity.
lot.
Because I remember when I was on the Cal APA design team, one of the first things that we did was that we ensured that those administrator performance expectations were lined up accordingly. Like we went through a whole process to with the alignment between the capsules and the capes, which I would imagine is very similar for the TPEs. So I guess my question, what kind of validity are we talking about here? Are we talking about construct validity, content validity, concurrent validity? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm trying to figure out what my thought is on this, but if you boil it down to very simplistic, that if the instrument has predictive validity, then default, it's going to have all those other types of validities. If you have an instrument that can predict accurately who is going to be able to be a teacher or not, then the content of the assessment must be valid, because if you're able to use it in that way,
Right.
predictability, I mean, an assessment that's a gatekeeper, it's a licensure element. The whole point is to predict who can be a teacher, who's prepared to be a teacher, who's going to be a good teacher. If you had, you had some other weird kind of, well, now I'm going to argue the opposite. If you had some other weird kind of test that, let's say at the end of your program, we gave everybody, a hopscotch test, and we found out that everyone who could play hopscotch turned out to be a great teacher. It would have great predictive validity, but it would have no content validity. It would have no, but the odds are you're not going to have that without the content validity. So it's sort of impossible. That's why I think you can go without saying if it actually is predictive, then it's going to have the other elements.
And so how would we define? What would be our working definition? I think I love what you said about predictive validity. Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about here. But
Yeah,
I
I
don't-
think that's the most.
but I don't know what the rest of you all feel.
I've just started trying to pop some of these up here. Yeah. I'm looking at some of the definitions that were given, I think from the ones that we did last time. And, I mean, I think one that seems consistent is it refers to the test measures what it aims to measure.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think at the sort of baseline level, I mean, that's what it is. And I think we don't have to determine if the test does those things. We just have to define, right? And so we could say underneath that is the different kinds of validity. So we want it to measure the things that it intends to measure along these sort of areas or dimensions. In terms of validity.
So I like what you said about that it measures what it's intended to measure.
Yeah.
So I think like on the broad level, that should be what we're talking about. Do the TPAs measure the TPAs that the TPEs that they're intended to measure? Would that be accurate?
I think so.
Because the TPEs are the constructs that we're attempting to measure.
You're talking about content validity, yeah. How well it covers.
Construct.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think along all of those dimensions, right?
It does.
Because the construct and the content
What's
both have to be valid for them to be.
Right. So the constructs are the TPEs, and you mentioned TPE 7, for example.
Yeah.
So that's what it's intending to measure is,
Mhm.
in your case, TPE 7.
So I think the constructs are the actual prompts.
The
Right.
construct validity determines if a test measures the concept it was designed to measure.
Which are the TPEs. So the TPEs are the constructs. So I would say, I would pose it as a question, do the TPAs measure the intended TPEs as designed or something like that?
Right.
And using research language, it would be all relevant parts of the constructs.
Yes.
Measure the TPEs designed to
The
measure.
relevant parts of the TPEs. He was trying to say something.
Was it Tina?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Now we can, hi.
Hey, hi. They're letting me participate now.
Yay. We are talking about different types of validity.
Yes, I've been listening in. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we have, do the TPAs measure relevant parts of the intended TPEs or TPEs? Because I think they're very specific on the TPEs that they're measuring. The intended.
Yeah,
TPEs.
intended, sorry, I missed that.
And then underneath that, we would have our bullets.
And are you all separating out valid and authentic?
We haven't even gotten to it.
We haven't yet.
We're on valid right now.
But yep.
Got it. Yeah, just checking. I think that's a good idea.
You know, I also think an important part of this, especially since we're looking at some point talking about this survey that CTA has given us about people's perceptions of the TPA.
Yeah.
Is face validity
Face validity.
of on the surface when, you know, how much does an instrument appear to measure what it's supposed to measure so that people accept it and.
Right. And that's why I think the point that you were making, Beverly, about the predictability, I think we have to really be mindful about what we think this exam can be predictive of.
Right, because what exactly are we trying to predict? You know, I said sort of elegantly who can be a good teacher or not, but that's very inexact. Like what is the beginning level of competency? What's the level of the bar that we are trying to predict that this person can step over in order to be teacher of record? So, you know, we
Right.
want it to predict that they have some minimal level of competence to be teacher of record. That's what we want it to predict. Now, a whole different question is, what is that level? Maybe that's the question the other group's talking about is this appropriate for beginning
Well,
teachers?
and that's what's in the
Right.
document.
Yeah.
When you look at the rubrics, if you see what a level is, for example, on 1.4, which is student with this is the specialist one. And so when I read it, it says candidates plan, activities, strategies, and or assessment, I think for understanding outside of the lesson, is to provide a safe and positive learning environment, promote FS3's well-being, and support FS3's progress toward meeting the content-specific learning goals of the lesson in IEP. Reasonable, it's not excessive. I feel like that's like the range for any teacher, like, can they plan a lesson, plan for assessing in a reasonable way that's safe and doesn't harm the children, right? Like, that's a reasonable expectation.
So it seems like I'm when I'm listening to that, I think the question is whether or not the task and the rubrics are appropriate, right? So the task itself has to be appropriate, and then the rubrics have to be
right.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree too. And one of the things I thought was particularly helpful in defining this term was on the handout on page 4, the AERA sort of blurb on from their standards for educational and psychological testing.
Yes.
And so defining validity is the extent to which the evidence and theory support the interpretations of scores. So that the evidence and theory, the theory, I think, is where the rubrics come in. This is a theory of what we think we want to see in a beginning teacher at different levels of sophistication. And so the face validity question is, does everybody agree with that? Yeah. And so that's one element of that. And then the second element is the actual evidence itself that's collected. So I think we would agree that this is where I think authentic and validity cross. So I think we would agree that lesson plans and the actual artifacts that the teachers use to teach are authentic pieces of evidence. But where we don't always agree is when teachers have to write out the decisions that they're making, for instance. There's an argument that people who can write better will be able to convey better what they're doing as a teacher. And so is that valid evidence of their practice? As opposed
to like, what would be the alternative to that? Because I agree that is
right.
What
I don't know what the alternative is, but I think these are the issues we just have to raise up at this moment.
Well, I'm looking, Tina, since you mentioned the AERA definition, right above it is Linda's writing about validity, and she's because I was talking about predictive, she says use evidence to predict real world success. That generic term, real world success.
I know.
But are we
have
trying
no
to
idea what
predict
that
real world
means.
success, or are we trying to say this person is ready to begin?
Right, and I think she's using the phrase as the stand-in for what we're talking about, but it's such a generic, non-definitional term, you know.
Yeah.
Real world.
But I think that is where our sort of theory of action comes in. There's a whole theory of action behind the way this exams and our TPEs were designed. We think that this is what beginning teacher should know and be able to do. The TPEs were based on that. Everything was based on that. And so then we have to, if we have these, they're in law, and now the TPEs are supposed to measure them, and therefore we need to find the best ways for them to measure them. And you all were already saying that, you were all over that. I think where we run into trouble is with the predictability. And when we're looking at things right now, we can only get data, for instance, around things like how long do teachers stay in the classroom? Is it appropriate for the TPA to predict that? I don't know, because I don't know that it was designed for that. It was designed to give us an indicator of whether a teacher is ready to begin teaching.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that becomes a validity issue.
Mhm.
So, I was just gonna say, so if we're thinking back to our general working definition, just because I don't remember what time we started.
We
and I have,
started at 1:45.
okay, so we only have 20 minutes. So we have the question, do the TPAs measure the relevant parts of the intended TPE? We'll put something in, make that into more of a statement for our general working definition.
That they need to,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
instead of do they need to
TPAs need to.
measure relevant parts of
Measure
it, yeah.
of the intended TPEs.
Mhm.
Does that fit for the authentic part as well? I'll write this up on the other side.
Or just take the do they, cross that off and change it to.
Yeah, but then I was thinking we could put the attributes underneath.
Yeah.
I think the authentic part is a question of like whether or not this is representative of what one would be asked to do as a teacher in the classroom. So it's more like, is
it based on an authentic task
Mhm,
that's
I
authentic
think
to the field, right?
I believe so.
Right.
And I think that's where the question of course, like maybe a lesson plan or the enactment of the teaching does feel authentic. And the question of whether or not writing is an authentic
Yeah.
part of what a teacher might do, they may reflect in different ways or.
Right, and so you get back about, I mean, you do want to ensure that reflection is a real part of what a teacher does. And in the assessment, you want to see that they can and are reflecting. And so the authentic question gets into how else can you assess reflection without the writing, without the.
Unless it's,
Video.
yeah, video,
Yeah.
verbally.
Yep.
But
So
don't we
evidence-
offer that option?
I thought we did.
I'm not sure if the Ed TPA does. I thought I read over the different assessments
You
in
might
the
be-
past.
You
so
might be right, I might be thinking of like Rika that offers the.
Yeah, they have to portfolio.
Yeah.
I feel like Cal TPA did offer some option, or maybe that was just for video.
It should be in here in the manual somewhere.
Okay, yeah, it was.
It's like, so if our struggle with this part of the authentic task is the reflection, how do we, if that might be part of an issue about both face and construct validity is is there a way to better assess teacher reflection other than writing that would be more authentic to what teachers actually do?
So. Yes.
So
But I'm wondering if, so for capturing this, evidence collected aligns with, I'm trying to get at that authentic part here.
With an authentic task for the field.
Well,
But I'm trying to, can we do it without using the word authentic?
Okay,
Well,
so
I want to look at Jason as our high school teacher and think,
Yeah.
okay, Jason, so after you teach and you think about afterwards, what went right, what went wrong, what would I do differently? Your process of reflection is like you just thinking about it, right? I mean, how else?
Because it changes, so at the, now, like 20 years in, it is a lot of thinking, jotting down. I just have a journal where I'm just jotting down the notes and what I've noticed. And some of the things you just kind of internalize because you've been doing it so much and you know what moves you need to make. And so you're just taking these little script notes. At the beginning, you're really not even having much time to do reflection. You're just trying to survive. So even though I do like those quick notes at the beginning, there was no reflection
Yeah,
really. It was just you're trying to make a lesson plan, turn it into the principal, whatever template they're asking you to do.
right.
And it
Right,
does
and-
say narrative.
And you have to be realistic about what real teachers can do and actually do. But at the same time, at the beginning, you want to instill those habits of mind and habits of practice
Exactly,
about
exactly.
reflection that encourage that, so
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know, from the beginning, but
Like writing a
It's
formal
helpful
lesson.
it's helpful to know the process.
Yeah,
But when you get into the thick of it, it was like, oh, doing that whole process was like an ideal world.
Right.
It was not like my
Right.
actual
Well,
reality.
because so much of your reflection happens like when you're driving to and from work, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking about how it went today, how.
well, yeah, because you have to figure in the reality of it. When we started talking and Juliet was talking about, you know, here's what happens in a lesson, you know, you do an assessment, an informal assessment, you figure out what they know and you adapt and I'm thinking of all that, thinking of, you know, a classroom teacher doing that hundreds of
Yeah,
times a
right,
day
right,
with
yeah.
every task that you're doing. And it's kind of like,
It's not
yes,
really.
that's what we want teachers
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to do. But to ask them to document every time
that
that they do
process.
it is
That's a lot.
because so much of it is just, it almost happens without the thought. Where you change directions, you
Yeah.
see what a student is saying or doing, and you change your approach.
That reflection in action.
Right, you just
I
do
mean,
it like
how do you
almost
interpret
instinctively.
One of the talk about it, organic.
We
Yeah.
developed slide decks for
Yeah.
the lessons. And what we would do as they would reflect is we would go in and we would make adaptations to it based on their feedback.
Right.
So I think, you know, and it didn't take very long to do. I would imagine as a teacher, I remember doing that in my lesson plans. Like I would save my lesson plan book from year to year and I'd go in and I'd write myself a little note. Don't forget this next year,
Yeah.
remember that. So that was the reflection process.
So I love this discussion about reflection because I think it's such a key element to what we're talking about with validity too, because it's such an important part of teaching. And have some of our TPAs become so high stakes that requires candidates to be so scripted that they're afraid to admit when they've made an error. And therefore, we need to be sure, in order for this to be valid and authentic, that there is room for errors, which teachers make every single day. And that's how you get better at it, when you recognize what's happening and change it the following time, or at least say how you're going to change it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've had early career teachers say, well, I guess I'm just gonna make this part up, right? Where they feel like they can't answer honestly, like there's be something
yeah.
where we're
So,
kind of mitigating the incentive, or not, maybe not incentive, but that not habit to be able to like, we want them to be honest.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
they need to take certain portions because it's just not realistic to what they're experiencing.
Right.
But for it to be authentic, you have to think about mitigating. I don't want to say lying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Of
right.
the on the spot. Well,
I provide space for honest reflection.
One of the things, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tina.
Oh, when I was thinking about this, I realized one of the things that was really helpful to me was when I started to think about all of the things that we've learned that might be threatening the validity and authenticity of the instrument. So one of them is just this that we just discussed here, that candidates are maybe feeling like they can't make mistakes, and so they're not giving their authentic performance necessarily. Another is that we've maybe sometimes the tasks have become there's so much criteria involved to demonstrate what you're supposed to demonstrate that candidates start scripting what they're doing instead of what they might normally do in a more authentic setting.
Well, this makes me think too, that when we were talking earlier about predictive validity, that the purpose of this assessment is to, have this bottom line. But the instrument itself is meant not only as an assessment, it's also meant to drive learning.
Right.
Because programs are encouraged to essentially teach to the test, to look at what the TPA has to be done and ensure that through the entire program, their candidates are prepared to do that. And so when we think about things like reflection and how hard that is to fit it into the assessment structure, and as Tina was saying, reflection is such an important part of being an effective educator. How do we keep it in enough so that the learning part of TPA doesn't skip over that? Because when TPAs are modified, preparation programs are going to be modified too. Things that are emphasized and de-emphasized are not just going to affect the candidate taking the test and the result, it's going to affect the whole route up to the test, because programs, it's part of their accreditation and they need to make sure their candidates do well. And so that's an equal part of sort of the validity of this is, are the tasks appropriately emphasizing the parts of preparation that we think need to be there? So it's that type of validity as well.
I agree. I also think that speaks for the last thing I'll jump in at the moment with is group 3 on our handout. They wrote down, I thought, some really nice cogent definitions of authentic and valid for what they mean by this. And anyway, I thought that that group was a good group to start with, also to bring in one of them being has to involve an array of tasks. Teaching is such a complex endeavor that even though we're trying to measure a point in time, because of its complexity, do we want to ensure that there are an array of tasks and evidence for what we're talking about? Multiple ways for the teachers to demonstrate their practice.
But group 3 also made a comment that I thought was interesting. Their last one about they want to believe that if the program's doing a good job, then the TPA shouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be a big deal for the candidate if they've done a good job. But again, it's that cycle of the TPA is a big deal for the prep program. It's like,
But we take it.
Yeah.
Riverside County,
well, I think most programs do because they know it's part of their accreditation
It's
data.
interesting to me though, because when you look at the graph that we got the last time, over a third of the programs are below 40% passing rates on the TPAs. I'm sorry, on the TPAs.
Really? Now, I remember looking at the passing rate thing, but I don't remember that figure. I remember I remember being told there was one program that was 30%.
So remember, they gave us a graph by institution. And if you look at that, almost a third of them are scoring below 40%.
Was that in our physical paper handouts last time?
I think so.
Help me find that again, because I'm not doubting you at all. I'm thinking I missed that and I'm very interested in that. So, okay. Yeah, because that should be.
But when you look at passing rates in general, the others are much higher. So that's why the average isn't low across the state.
Right. And it's probably too a difference between first time pass rates and eventual pass rates.
Yes.
And what was the data in the graph? Was it first time or?
I think it was
overall.
It was overall.
Oh, no, see, I was going to say, it must have been first time because if it was that many.
I'll pull it up.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see that. I don't know how I missed it.
So thinking about our working definition, just getting us back to that. I tried to capture some of the different things. I don't know if that all belongs in the working definition.
Tina, you can't.
Yeah, Tina, can I read that to you?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I can't see it.
Right. So we have the kind of the teaching performance assessment measures the relevant parts of the intended teaching performance expectations. And then underneath that, the evidence collected aligns with the typical practices of a beginning teacher. There's room for errors. It provides space for honest reflection with alternative methods to demonstrate that reflection. And then the tasks appropriately emphasize what we would want emphasized in teacher preparation.
Glad you got that last point.
I think that's great. I think you could write tasks and rubrics, but I guess, or we just say when we're talking about the task, we're talking about both the rubrics and.
But I think we should bring the rubrics in, but I think you brought up a really
Yes,
important point
gotcha.
earlier when you talked about the rubrics represent the theory that.
The theory of
So just
action.
add it in
So
there.
tasks and rubrics
Yeah.
appropriately emphasize.
Yeah, you could even do tasks, evidence, and
Tasks,
rubrics.
evidence, and yeah.
Maybe.
You did a good job, Julia. So
I think that sounds great. Barb.
and then
Appropriately emphasize. What we want
And then
emphasized.
add reflection to the one above because you said it when you
Provide space for honest reflection with alternative methods to demonstrate that
Reflection.
reflection.
Yeah, because you said it when you read.
Well, because when I read it out loud, I don't.
Right, you intuitively
Yeah.
saw that it was missing.
Room for errors, evidence collected aligns with typical practices of a beginning teacher.
I'm wondering about one of the threats that Tina brought up.
Yeah, that's really important to capture.
Yeah, and so it made me think about the validity and authenticity of both the assessment itself, but also is it an accurate reflection of what that person can do? And so I think, I wonder if it's something that we could put in the wording that's like the TPA measure, or is an honest or is an accurate reflection of what the candidate's competency around the relevant parts of the.
Accurately.
And I think that's where it varies, because I think for a reasonable person who was reasonably prepared by their institution, yes. But if they were left to swim on their own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you've got,
So-
yeah.
This is also reminding me of one thing that group 3 was saying, that for what is consistent in tasks of teachers across a full range of school contexts.
Yeah.
That's a question. And then my thought about what's potentially been criticized about the TPAs is that sometimes the context prohibits demonstration of the task. And how do we integrate that into our definition of validity and authenticity?
So. Is that applicable in a full range of contexts? Applicable, is it applicable to right?
Or would it be at the top where it says the TPA measures the relevant parts of the intended TPEs in an environment that is conducive to all, or something? I think we could add it up there.
Isn't that one of the
Not
charges
that
to the other groups about context or something like that?
Yeah.
It's the other group right now is a wide range of classroom settings.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
If not, we can
That-
add in a wide range of classroom settings at the end of there.
And then they have to define what that means.
Yeah.
We just use the term. By the way, hi, nice to see you again.
On the whiteboard way too high.
I'm going for short people, we're gonna use that time session. But did Adam just come in and say we're out of time?
Then we have until 1:50.
250?
I'm sorry, 2:50.
I was like, wait, so we have like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Candidate.
Do we?
What to do?
Sorry.
Oh, accurately measures what a candidate is able to do.
What were you gonna say, Tina?
Oh, I was just wondering if I'm thinking about the push-pull between adaptability,
Yeah.
and standardization, that we want to ensure that our assessments have some consistency across institutions, across classrooms, et cetera, so we can say something about the performance of candidates across our state. And at the same time, they have to be flexible enough to meet the needs of all the learners in the classroom, and meet the teachers' needs, and meet the contextual needs. So it's, I guess I'm trying to figure out. I don't have a good answer for where this goes in our definition, but this push-pull between adaptability and standardization.
I'm just gonna write that as a challenge.
Okay.
Tina, I just texted you a picture of this board.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
Oh, thanks.
Between adaptability and standardization. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. That's
Very real.
Oh, I've got the picture. It looks good. Because I think at this point we just need some bullet points.
yeah. Do we want to, I don't know who's our reporter out, include any of this stuff too, or are we just giving them the working definition? Or we want to preface it by saying we talked about the different types of validity and how it applies.
Beth, I think you're perfectly
I do
positioned to
too.
do that.
You should definitely do that.
Because I think if you look back at page 1, we're really just identifying bullet point attributes. We don't have to come up with a coherent definition at this point.
Right, exactly.
Well. We have to put a general working definition.
Yeah.
And then the attribute.
My nose was running, my eyes were watering.
And
Okay,
so
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, Tina, I just texted you all 3 of our boards. If we stop now and quit writing, we'll be able to stop texting you pictures.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Jason, what were you starting to say? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just gonna try to recount the notes and see what we need to change so that I can add it to the template.
Oh, because he gave us a.
It says write a general working definition, and then we list out the attributes and the description.
Oh, he does want us to
Elaborating
write
on
one.
the working definition.
We got 5 minutes.
That's what I thought we had.
So our working definition is at top.
And I think underneath it's our bullets.
I think
Yeah.
so.
So for the bullets, what do I have? I have, or maybe that's the working definition. I have relevance to TPEs. I was just trying to put subheadings. Alignment with teacher preparation.
What do you have for the working definition?
Yeah, I thought this is what we were.
That top part, I'm just
top
trying to get
part?
headings for the attributes. So the TPA should emphasize tasks, evidence, and rubrics that reflect typical practices of beginning teachers.
Are we looking at the first arrow there?
Evidence collected aligns with the typical practices of a beginning teacher? Or you're looking down farther?
No, I'm just looking at what I have for my notes.
Oh.
So there's talk about alignment. So evidence collected aligns with typical practices of beginning teacher. for tasks, evidence, and rubrics appropriately emphasizing what we want emphasized in teacher prep.
Yeah, that was, sorry, that bullet part got erased. That was down here. The tasks, evidence, what we would want emphasized in teacher preparation.
So I think we have 4 attributes.
Yeah, the evidence collected aligns with typical practices, room for errors. Provide space for honest reflection with alternative methods to demonstrate that reflection. Tasks, evidence, and rubrics appropriately emphasize what we want to see.
The new time is 3 o'clock.
wow.
That is inclusive of a break.
Okay, thank you.
We want to also include the idea of mitigating the threats to validity, or you're saying that that's already in these 4?
Let's see what they think.
Or sorry, authenticity.
Well, the candidate fear of being wrong, I think, is partially why we have room for error.
Yeah.
And too much criteria involved overwhelms candidates. Well, I think that's true, but I think when you look at TPEs and what we expect beginning teachers to know and be able to do, there's no way around it, that there is a lot. And even though it's a matrix sample of, no assessment is going to assess everything that a teacher has to know and be able to do, it's still a lot, but you can't. Even a simple lesson includes so much.
Yeah.
What do we mean by room for errors?
I think that we were talking about, we should probably expand on
They
that.
were talking about the comment you made, that
Yeah,
came out of
that
your
was-
comment about the teacher who said, like, well, I'll just make it up because I don't know what they want here, and like
The
that,
teacher
that
who's-
not knowing and just.
Or afraid to admit that the lesson that they taught for the TPA bombed.
Yeah, and yeah.
Yeah, and
And
so
being
I
able to
can't,
address
Yeah.
successes and.
yeah.
So maybe something about the developing practice or like just an
It
how I
assumes
read it.
perfection, or if
yeah,
Right.
There's a developmental trajectory for beginning teachers
That's a
rather
good way to
than.
put it.
Assumes, yeah. Developmental.
And I'm wondering if the challenge, I wonder if that is another attribute. Even if it's just like attend to the push
Yeah.
pull between.
Hence too.
Yeah. Did we run out of attribute space?
We can add.
Okay. Okay, great. I think that's an important.
I think that's the point Jason is making is what that we're coming back to is a really important one, because that is the theory behind the assessment, or one of the theories behind what we are trying to measure or what we believe. And that is that it is a developmental process, and therefore it's important to capture teachers' thinking in terms of how they're reflecting on their teaching, where they think the changes need to be made, how they're adapting things for kids, et cetera. That's the theory that we're working with. And so we need to understand what that theory is, and the field needs to agree, or whomever needs to agree that that is a theoretical definition of a beginning teacher, what we expect. And then that's different from the actual evidence that we collect with an assessment, which is more about what the task is asking the teachers to do. And then how we're asking the teachers to demonstrate it. So it needs all of those things, but I think that was already in there. The theory, we have to understand what the theory is and make sure that the assessment is actually abiding by that theory. And then second, that the tasks are designed that the evidence is an authentic representation of teaching.
I think we're at a good stop place
Okay.
to allow ourselves a couple minutes of a break.
Move. We need to. We have. Yes. Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we're saying we have 5 attributes.
You know what I just realized we don't have in our definition that's kind of critical to validity, and it's really about the interpretation and use of scores.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe that should just be a placeholder, but that's
Breaking up.
You're breaking up, Tina. We heard.
We can't understand what you're saying. Seems like it might be a bad signal.
I think we got all.
Finish your thought, Juliet. You knew exactly.
I thought there was an important point that she was making, I think. Right, Tina, we lost you, but I think that your point was about how the scores are being interpreted and used.
Yes,
Have that
yes,
So we add
yes.
sort of an end note to all of this, is that,
Yeah,
that's another important piece that has to be addressed.
yeah,
How score, because it's not a feature of the assessment in itself,
right.
but it affects the validity of it, is how the scores are used.
Interpreted and used, yes.
Yes.
So even though that's not an element of the test itself, it is an element of its validity.
Yes,
That was a good add-on, Tina.
Yeah.
thanks.
All right, see you.